The observation deck was too small for him. It had always been too small. Velmath's massive scaled body barely fit through the doorway, and his wings remained folded tight against his back to avoid knocking over the delicate human equipment that still lined the walls. 847 years, and he still moved carefully around these fragile machines as if their creators might return at any moment to scold him for breaking something. The view outside the reinforced window showed nothing but darkness and distant stars. The solar system that once held Earth was gone, collapsed into a strange void that astronomers called the Severance. No light escaped it. No signals came from it. Nothing lived there anymore, or so everyone believed. Everyone except Velmath. He pressed one clawed hand against the glass, feeling the cold seep through his scales. His kind could survive in the vacuum of space for short periods, their bodies burning internal fires hot enough to forge stars. But even he felt the chill of this place at the edge of everything, where hope came to die. The console beside him beeped softly. Another automated report from the Galactic Council. He didn't need to read it to know what it said. The same thing it had said for centuries. Humanity was extinct, their worlds were being redistributed, and his vigil was pointless. They wanted him to come home. They wanted him to accept reality. Velmath deleted the message without reading it. His thoughts drifted backward, as they often did during the long, empty hours. He remembered fire and rage, the taste of battle, the pride of the Dracothi Empire as they swept across the galaxy, conquering world after world. Humans had been next on their list. Small, weak mammals who had barely mastered faster-than-light travel. It should have been easy. It wasn't. Humans fought with a desperation and cleverness that surprised everyone. They didn't have the strength of dragons or the technology of the elder races, but they had something else. They had each other. Every time a human ship fell, 10 more appeared. Every time a colony was threatened, civilians armed themselves and stood alongside soldiers. They should have broken. They should have surrendered. They didn't. Velmath had been a commander then, leading a strike force against a human supply depot. His ship had taken damage from a surprisingly well-coordinated defense, and he'd been forced to land on an asteroid for repairs. His crew was dead. His communication systems were destroyed. He was alone, and his ship was bleeding atmosphere. He'd expected to die there. Then a human salvage ship had appeared. A small vessel barely armed with a crew of 3. Velmath had prepared to fight, even wounded as he was, but the ship didn't attack. It docked with its damaged craft, and a single human in a worn engineering suit had climbed through the airlock. The human's name was Timon. Velmath had demanded to know why the human didn't just leave him to die. They were at war, after all. Timon had looked at him with tired eyes and said something that Velmath would never forget. We all deserve to see home again. Then Timon had spent 6 hours repairing Velmath's ship. Not perfectly, but enough to get him back to his fleet. The human had worked in silence, occasionally humming a tune that Velmath didn't recognize. When the repairs were finished, Timon had simply nodded and returned to his own ship. No demands, no conditions, just mercy given freely to an enemy who deserved none. Velmath had returned to his fleet confused and angry. The war had continued for another 2 years before everything changed. The Severance had appeared without warning. A cosmic entity, a force, a thing beyond understanding. It consumed entire star systems, breaking them down into nothing. The Galactic Council had panicked. Every species scrambled to evacuate, to run, to survive. Faster-than-light travel became erratic near the Severance. Evacuation routes collapsed. Millions died in the chaos. Then humanity had done something impossible. They'd discovered that their minds, their consciousness, could slow the Severance. Not stop it, but slow it. Enough to buy time. But it required every human, their entire species, channeling their psychic potential into a barrier. It would kill them eventually, burn them out like candles in a storm. But it would give everyone else time to escape. The Galactic Council had argued for days about whether to accept the offer. Some called it a trick. Others said it was suicide and refused to let humanity throw themselves away. But the Severance kept coming, and options kept disappearing, and finally they'd agreed. Velmath remembered the evacuation. Dragon ships designed for war had been retrofitted to carry refugees. He'd commanded one such ship, ferrying thousands of smaller species to safety beyond the Severance's reach. And every time he'd made a run, he'd seen humans standing at their posts, glowing with an eerie light as they poured everything they had into the barrier. The last run had been the worst. The severance was close enough to feel, a pressure against the mind that made thinking difficult. Velmath's ship had been the last one out, and he'd seen Taemin standing on a platform near Earth's moon. The human had looked older, tired, but he'd smiled when he saw Velmath's ship. Through the static-filled communication channel, Taemin had sent one final message. If we survive somehow, we'll need a friend to light the way home. Then the barrier had closed, and Earth's solar system had vanished into darkness. The Galactic Council had declared humanity extinct after 50 years of silence. After 100 years, they'd begun redistributing human colonies and territories. After 200 years, humans were barely mentioned in historical records. After 800 years, most species had forgotten them entirely. But Velmath remembered. He'd claimed this station, the furthest outpost of the old human network, and he'd waited. Every day he'd scanned the void for signals. Every day he'd maintained the old equipment. Every day he'd hoped. His fellow dragons thought he was mad. The Galactic Council thought he was wasting his life. Maybe they were right. Maybe humanity was truly gone, and he was just a fool clinging to sentiment. The console beeped again. Velmath sighed, ready to delete another automated report. But this time the sound was different. Higher-pitched, urgent. He turned, his heart suddenly racing despite 8 centuries of disappointment. The screen showed something impossible, a signal. A human distress beacon, broadcasting on frequencies that hadn't been used in over 800 years. The source was inside the severance, in a place where nothing should exist. Velmath's claws trembled as he brought up the signal details. It was faint, breaking up, but it was definitely human in origin. The timestamp made no sense. The beacon had been activated 800 years ago, but the signal was only reaching him now as if something had just released it from a time lock. He ran the analysis 3 times, certain he was making a mistake. But the computer confirmed it every time. The signal was real. The coordinates were clear. Someone, somewhere inside that impossible darkness, was calling for help. Velmath looked out at the void where Earth used to be. His friend had asked him to light the way home. For 847 years, he'd kept a light burning at the edge of the world, waiting for anyone who might need it. Now finally it was time to bring that light into the darkness. He began preparing his ship for launch, his movements quick and purposeful after centuries of stillness. The Galactic Council would try to stop him. They'd say it was too dangerous, too foolish, that he was chasing ghosts. They'd probably send someone to drag him back. Velmath smiled, showing rows of sharp teeth. Let them try. He'd made a promise to a human engineer who'd shown mercy to an enemy. He'd made a promise to an entire species that had sacrificed everything so others could live. And dragons, whatever else they might be, kept their promises. The distress signal pulsed again, a heartbeat in the darkness. Velmath answered it with a simple message. I hear you. I'm coming. Hold on. Then he began the long preparations for a journey into a place where no one had returned from in over 8 centuries. He didn't know what he'd find there. He didn't know if he'd survive, but he knew he had to try. Because 847 years ago, a human had looked at an enemy and chosen mercy. And Velmath had spent every day since learning what that meant. Now it was time to prove he'd learned the lesson well. The ship arrived 3 days after Velmath had sent out his intention to enter the Severance. It was a sleek council enforcement vessel, black and silver, designed to look impressive and intimidating. Velmath watched it dock with his station and felt a tired amusement. They'd sent someone to stop him just as he'd expected. The airlock cycled and a tall figure stepped through. Corvex was a Thanari, a species of crystalline beings who served as the galaxy's peacekeepers. His body reflected light in sharp angles, and his voice resonated like wind chimes when he spoke. Commander Velmath, Corvex said formally, I've been ordered to decommission this station and escort you back to Dracothi space. Your vigil is over. No, Velmath replied simply. Corvex's crystalline face couldn't show emotion, but his tone shifted to something almost sympathetic. I've read your reports. I know about the signal. The Council has analyzed it. They believe it's an echo, a ghost transmission from old equipment finally breaking down. There's nothing alive in the Severance. Then you won't mind if I check, Velmath said. I mind that you'll die doing it, Corvex countered. That void has killed every probe we've sent into it. The physics inside are unstable. Space-time doesn't work properly. You'll be torn apart before you get a kilometer past the barrier. Velmath began loading supplies onto his ship, ignoring the enforcement officer. His vessel was old but sturdy, designed for long-range exploration. He'd modified it over the centuries, adding redundant systems and reinforcing the hull. If anything could survive the severance, it would be this ship and his own stubborn body. Why? Corvex asked finally. Why throw away centuries of life for a species that's been gone longer than most civilizations last? What did humans mean to you? Velmath stopped. He turned to face Corvex fully, and when he spoke, his voice carried the weight of 800 years of memory. Let me tell you what they meant, he said. Let me tell you what happened at the end. The galaxy had been burning. The severance consumed systems faster than anyone could evacuate them. Faster than light travel became unreliable, trapping millions of beings in its path. The Council had fractured into panic and self-interest. Some species hoarded ships, refusing to help others. Some fled immediately, abandoning allies. The great galactic civilization was tearing itself apart from fear. Then humanity had made their discovery. A small team of human scientists, led by a woman named Daon, had found that human consciousness could interact with the severance in ways other species couldn't. They could push against it, slow it like using their minds as a dam against a flood, but it required all of them, every human, and it would burn them out eventually, consuming their life force until nothing remained. The Council had debated for 3 days while the severance grew closer. Some species refused to accept the sacrifice. Others argued it was humanity's choice to make. A few openly said that if humans wanted to throw themselves away, it solved the resource allocation problem. Admiral Hiram had stood before the Council and made the offer official. Humanity would buy time for everyone else to escape. They asked for only one thing in return, that they be remembered. The Council had agreed. The evacuation began in earnest, coordinated by human traffic controllers who worked until their minds literally burned out from the psychic strain. Every ship in the galaxy was pressed into service. Dragons, who'd been humanity's enemies just years before, found themselves ferrying refugees while human soldiers guarded the evacuation points. Velmath had been there. He'd seen it happen. He'd commanded a dragon vessel retrofitted to carry thousands of beings, making run after run through increasingly dangerous space. And every time he'd passed through human-controlled space, he'd seen them. They stood at their posts, glowing with an inner light that grew brighter and more terrible with each passing day. They didn't complain. They didn't beg to be saved. They worked until they collapsed, and then others took their place. Children as young as 10 helped coordinate evacuations. Elderly humans with decades of experience managed the barrier calculations. Everyone contributed everything they had. Taemin had been there at the end, working on the barrier generators near Earth's moon. His sister Dayun stood beside him, her body radiating so much psychic energy that it hurt to look at her. Velmath's ship had been the last one scheduled to leave human space, carrying a mixed group of refugees from a dozen species. As they prepared to jump to faster-than-light speed, Velmath had looked back. The barrier humanity was creating looked like a wall of light, beautiful and terrible, and in front of it he could see Earth, already beginning to fade as the severance pressed closer. Taemin had opened a communication channel one last time. His voice was weak, strained, but he'd smiled through the video link. "Thank you for the evacuation runs, Commander," Taemin had said. "You've saved a lot of lives." "You're saving everyone," Velmath had replied, his voice rough with emotion he didn't fully understand. "Why? Why do this?" "Because someone has to," Taemin had answered simply. "And we can. That's enough reason, isn't it?" Chayun had leaned into frame then, her eyes glowing with power. "Tell them we weren't afraid," she'd said. "Tell them humanity stood here and held the line because it was the right thing to do. Tell them to build something beautiful with the time we're buying." Then Taemin had sent that last message. "If we survive somehow, we'll need a friend to light the way home." The channel had closed. Velmath's ship had jumped to faster-than-light speed, and behind them, Earth's solar system had vanished into the severance, taking humanity with it. Velmath finished his story and looked at Corvex. The crystalline being stood silent for a long moment. "I didn't know," Corvex said quietly. "The history files They don't tell it that way. They just say humanity created a barrier that allowed the evacuation. They don't mention the sacrifice, the choice. History forgets," Velmath said. "That's why I remember. That's why I wait." He returned to loading his ship. After a moment, Corvex began helping him. The Council won't approve this, Korvax said. If we go into the Severance without authorization, we'll both be stripped of rank and probably imprisoned. We? Velmath asked. Korvax's crystalline body seemed to hum with determination. You're right. If there's even the smallest chance that some of them survived, someone needs to look. And if you're going to fly into that void like a mad dragon, someone should go with you to document how spectacularly you fail. Despite everything, Velmath felt something warm in his chest, a feeling he hadn't experienced in centuries. Not quite hope, but something close to it. Companionship, maybe. The knowledge that he wasn't alone in this anymore. They worked together in silence, loading supplies and running system checks. Velmath's ship was designed for one dragon. Not a dragon and a crystalline being, but they made it work. Korvax's people didn't need much life support anyway, being energy-based rather than biological. As they prepared for launch, Velmath pulled up the distress signal one more time. He'd decoded more of it over the past 3 days. It contained coordinates, as he'd thought, but also a fragment of a message. The encryption was old human military code, but Velmath had learned to read it centuries ago. The message read, Sanctuary Protocol active. 17 sites. Approximately 40,000 souls in stasis. Systems failing. Please respond. 40,000. Velmath's heart thundered in his chest. 40,000 humans hidden somehow inside the Severance waiting for rescue. It was impossible. It was a miracle. It was everything he'd hoped for and more. He showed the message to Korvax, who went very still. 40,000, the crystalline being whispered. Stars and void. They actually survived in there? Some of them, Velmath said. Maybe, if we're fast enough. Then we'd better stop talking and start flying, Korvax said. They launched 30 minutes later, the station's automated system shutting down behind them as they accelerated toward the dark sphere that marked the Severance's edge. Velmath's sensors immediately began showing strange readings. Space-time was twisted here, folded in on itself in ways that made navigation nearly impossible. But dragons had an advantage that most species didn't. They could feel energy directly, sense the flow of fundamental forces. Velmath closed his eyes and let his instincts guide him, feeling for the path of least resistance through the chaos. The ship shuddered as they crossed the barrier. Reality twisted. For a moment, Velmath saw everything and nothing, past and future overlapping into an impossible present. He felt the weight of every life humanity had saved, every moment of sacrifice they'd made. Then they were through and inside the Severance, flying through darkness lit only by their ship's running lights. We're alive, Korvax said, sounding surprised. Don't celebrate yet, Velmath replied. Now comes the hard part. He set course for the coordinates in the distress signal and prayed to whatever gods might listen that they weren't 800 years too late. The Severance was wrong. That was the only way Velmath could describe it. Space didn't feel like space here. Time moved strangely, skipping forward and backward in moments that made his head ache. His ship's instruments flickered and died randomly, forcing him to navigate by instinct and the faint trace of the distress beacon. Beside him, Korvax maintained a constant stream of observations, recording everything they saw. The crystalline being's natural ability to store information made him an ideal witness, even if they didn't survive to share what they'd learned. There, Korvax said suddenly, pointing at the view screen. Do you see that? Velmath looked. At first he saw nothing but the usual darkness and the occasional flicker of broken reality. Then he noticed it. A piece of metal floating in the void, positioned at an angle that seemed deliberate. As they flew closer, he saw another piece, then another. They formed a trail. Someone put those there, Velmath said, his voice filled with wonder. Someone marked a path. He followed the trail carefully, watching his ship's power levels. Dragonfire, the biological fusion reactor that powered his kind, remained stable here when most energy sources failed. But even his reserves were limited, and they had no way to know how far they'd need to travel. The trail led them through pockets of twisted space where gravity pulled in 3 directions at once, and light bent into impossible colors. Velmath's body ached from the strain of keeping the ship steady. Beside him, Korvax had gone dim, conserving energy to cope with the hostile environment. After what felt like hours or days, the trail led them to a cluster of objects floating in a relatively stable pocket of space. Velmath's sensors, working intermittently, identified them as cryopods. Human cryopods. His heart began to race. There were dozens of them, maybe 100, all connected by cables to a central power unit that flickered weakly. Most of the pods were dark, their occupants long dead, but 3 still showed active readings. 3 humans, alive, after 800 years inside this nightmare void. Velmath maneuvered his ship carefully alongside the cluster. He couldn't take all the pods, but he could take the 3 that still functioned. He extended his ship's cargo bay and began the delicate process of transferring them aboard. The first pod came loose easily. The second required some cutting through damaged cables. The third was attached to what looked like a small control station, and Velmath hesitated before disconnecting it. "Wait," Korvex said. "There's data storage in that control station." "Bring it too." With both pods and the control station secured, Velmath began the revival process on the first pod. He'd studied human biology over the centuries, preparing for a moment he'd barely dared to hope would come. The pod hissed as it opened, releasing clouds of vapor. Inside lay a woman elderly by human standards, her dark hair streaked with gray. Her eyes opened slowly, unfocused and confused. She gasped, her body jerking as 800 years of stasis suddenly ended. "Easy," Velmath said softly, trying to make his rumbling dragon voice as gentle as possible. "You're safe. You're aboard my ship." The woman's eyes focused on him. For a moment, terror flashed across her face, the instinctive fear of seeing a massive predator looming over her. Then recognition dawned and tears began streaming down her face. "Dragon," she whispered. "You're a dragon, you came. You actually came." "My name is Velmath," he said. "What's yours?" "Bora," she managed. "I'm Bora. How long? How long has it been?" 847 years, Velmath told her gently. Bora closed her eyes, fresh tears falling. "So long, we hoped. We thought maybe 100 years. Maybe 200 before someone could reach us. But 800, she looked at him again. "Why did you come?" "Your people were our enemies." "That was a long time ago," Velmath said, "and I owed a debt to one of your people. A man named Taemin." Bora's expression shifted to something Velmath couldn't read. "Taemin was my uncle," she said quietly. "He was on the last defense platform when the barrier closed." Did he? "I don't know," Velmath admitted, "but I intend to find out. Your distress beacon mentioned 17 sites. Do you know where they are?" Before Bora could answer, alarms blared. The second pod was failing, its systems overloaded by the strain of revival. Velmath moved quickly, using his own body heat to stabilize the temperature while Korvex rerouted emergency power. The pod hissed open and a man tumbled out, gasping and shaking. His name was Jiwoo, and he was younger than Bora, perhaps 40 in human years. He'd been an engineer on one of the sanctuary stations before being evacuated to the pods. His revival was rough, and he kept slipping in and out of consciousness as Velmath worked to stabilize him. The third pod opened to reveal emptiness. No body, just equipment and a holographic projector. Velmath activated it and an image appeared. A human man, thin and tired-looking, with kind eyes that reminded Velmath painfully of Taemin. "My name is Namgil," the hologram said. "If you're seeing this, it means someone finally came." "Thank you. Thank you for not forgetting us," the hologram flickered. "I was the coordinator for Sanctuary Protocol. We managed to get approximately 40,000 people into stasis across 17 hidden stations. I've included all the coordinates and access codes in this storage unit." The hologram showed Namgil looking down at something off-camera. "I'm sorry I won't be there to meet you. My pod failed 3 years ago. Or maybe it was 3 days. Time is strange here. But I used the last of my strength to repair the beacon network and activate the distress signal. If even one person survived because of it, then I did enough." The image shifted, showing Namgil's face close up. He was crying. "Tell them we tried. Tell them some of us made it. Tell them humanity didn't completely die in here, please." The hologram ended. Velmath stood in silence, his clawed hand clenched into a fist. Korvex had dimmed further, processing what they'd seen. "He died alone," Korvex said quietly, "fixing systems so others might live. Even at the end, even here, humans were still sacrificing themselves." Bora, who'd been watching from her recovery cot, spoke up. Her voice was weak but determined. "That's what Namgil was like. He wouldn't let anyone else stay behind to maintain the systems. Said he was the oldest, that he'd lived a full life already." She wiped her eyes. "He was only 43 when we went into stasis. He should have had decades more." Jiwoo stirred, his eyes opening. "Did we?" Did someone come? Yes, Borat told him. A dragon came. They actually came for us. Jiwoo looked at Velmath and smiled weakly. Humans and dragons working together. We used to dream about that during the war. Thought maybe after the fighting stopped. He coughed. Guess it just took 800 years. Velmath accessed the data storage unit Namgil had left. The coordinates were there, along with detailed information about each sanctuary station. They were scattered across the severance, hidden in stable pockets of space-time. The stations were designed to last 500 years at most. They were already 300 years past their expiration date. We need to move quickly, Velmath said. If these stations are failing, the people in them don't have much time. How will you get them all out? Bora asked. Your ship can't carry 40,000 people. No, Velmath agreed. But I'm not planning to do this alone. He activated his long-range communications array, modified over the years to punch through the severance barrier. It took several attempts, but finally, he got a signal through to the Edge Station's automated relay. This is Commander Velmath, he said into the transmission. I've confirmed the presence of surviving humans inside the severance. Approximately 40,000 souls in 17 locations. I'm invoking Article 7 of the Dracothi Code, Life Debt to Humanity. I'm calling on every dragon in the galaxy who remembers what humanity did for us. I'm asking you to come. I'm asking you to help me bring them home. He ended the transmission and looked at Bo-Ra and Jiwoo. Now we wait and see if anyone remembers. If anyone cares. Bo-Ra reached out and took his massive claw in her small hand. You cared enough to wait 800 years, she said. That's already more than we dared hope for. The ship drifted in the darkness while Velmath plotted courses to the other sanctuary stations. Korvex monitored the communication relay, watching for any response. Hours passed in tense silence. Then finally the relay activated. A message came through, crackling with interference but clear enough to understand. This is Wing Commander Sulhi of the Dracothi 5th Fleet. We remember. We're coming. Then another message. Dragon Scout Captain Bitna, en route to your position. Then another. And another. Within an hour, over 50 dragons had responded. Within a day, the number had grown to 300. 300 dragons from across the galaxy, dropping everything to answer a call for help, coming to repay a debt 800 years old. Velmath looked at Bo-Ra, who was crying again, but this time with something that looked like joy. We're going to get you all out, he promised. Every last one of you. I swear it. Outside, in the twisted space of the severance, the darkness seemed a little less absolute. Somewhere out there, 300 dragons were coming, an army of former enemies flying into the void to save the remnants of the species that had saved them first. And for the first time in 847 years, Velmath truly believed they had a chance. The dragons arrived like a swarm of fireflies in the darkness, their internal flames glowing through the twisted space of the severance. Velmath watched them approach, each ship broadcasting the old war codes that his kind had used during their conflict with humanity. Now those same codes would be used to save human lives. Wing Commander Sulhi was the first to dock with Velmath's ship. She was older than Velmath, her scales marked with scars from countless battles. She'd fought against humans during the war, and now she'd flown halfway across the galaxy to rescue them. Show me the locations, she said without preamble. Velmath displayed Namgil's data, 17 sanctuary stations scattered across the severance in pockets of stable space. Each station held between 1,000 and 5,000 humans in cryostasis. The stations were interconnected by the beacon network Namgil had maintained until his death. We need to split up, Sulhi said. Assign teams to each station. Extract the pods and get them back outside the severance before the collapse accelerates. Collapse? Korvex asked sharply. Sulhi gestured to her instruments. Our scientists detected it 3 days ago. The severance is becoming unstable. Whatever energy held it together for 8 centuries is finally giving out. We estimate 72 hours before the collapse becomes catastrophic. 72 hours. 3 days to rescue 40,000 people from 17 locations spread across a hostile void, where time and space didn't work properly. Velmath felt the weight of it settle on his shoulders, but he also felt the presence of 300 dragons around him. They could do this. They had to. The dragon fleet organized quickly with military efficiency that came from centuries of training. Teams were assigned to each sanctuary station. Velmath took the coordinates for the largest station. which reportedly held 5,000 humans. Bora insisted on coming with him despite her weakened condition. I was evacuated from Station 7, she said. That's the big one. I know the layout. You'll need me. They flew in formation, 17 teams of dragons moving through the Severance with careful precision. Velmath's team reached Station 7 after 6 hours of navigation through space that kept trying to fold in on itself. The station hung in a bubble of normal spacetime, protected by generators that hummed with fading power. The station was enormous, built into a hollowed-out asteroid. As they approached, Velmath saw signs of careful human engineering. Every system had backups. Every backup had backups. Someone had designed this place to survive long after anyone expected. Bora guided them to the docking port. Inside, the station was cold and dark except for emergency lighting. The cryobay stretched as far as Velmath could see. Rows and rows of pods, each containing a sleeping human. Most were still active, their displays showing green status lights. Most, but not all. Velmath saw dark pods scattered throughout. Failures over the centuries. He tried not to think about the people inside them. Tried to focus on the ones he could still save. A console near the entrance flickered to life as they approached. A hologram appeared showing a middle-aged human man with tired eyes. "Welcome to Sanctuary Station 7, the hologram said. "I'm Kyung-soo, station coordinator. If you're seeing this message, it means someone finally came. Thank you." The hologram explained the station's systems, how to safely extract the pods, and the revival procedures. Kyung-soo's message ended with coordinates for a master control room deep in the station. "There's someone still active here," Korvax said, checking his sensors. "One life sign in that control room. They found him there." Kyung-soo, the man from the hologram sitting in a chair surrounded by monitors. He was elderly now, his hair completely white, his body thin from rationing food and resources. But he was alive, and when he saw them enter, he smiled. "Took you long enough," he said, his voice weak but amused. "I've been awake for 37 years keeping these systems running. Started to think no one was coming." Velmath felt his throat tighten. "You stayed awake? For 37 years? Someone had to," Kyung-soo said. "The automated system started failing. I woke up to alarms and found half the station going dark. Managed to fix it, but I couldn't risk going back into stasis. What if everything failed while I was asleep?" He looked at the monitors showing thousands of pods. "These are my people. My responsibility. I wasn't going to let them die because I wanted to sleep." "You could have died," Bora said, tears in her eyes. "Better me than them," Kyung-soo replied simply. "I was old when we went into stasis. Most of these people are young. They deserve their chance." He looked at Velmath. "You're a dragon. I remember your kind. We fought a war." "We did," Velmath confirmed. "We were wrong." "Yes, you were," Kyung-soo agreed. "But you came back. You came to help. That counts for something." He pulled up displays on his monitors. "The pods can be disconnected and transported, but you need to keep them at specific temperatures. The revival process is delicate." "We have 300 dragon ships," Velmath said. "We can use our body heat to maintain temperature stability during transport." Kyung-soo nodded slowly. Dragons as life support systems. Who would have thought? He stood up, swaying slightly. "I want to help with the evacuation. I know every system in this station." "You need medical attention," Korvax protested. "I need to see this through," Kyung-soo countered. "I've spent 37 years keeping these people alive. I'm not stopping now." They worked through the next 20 hours, carefully extracting pods and loading them onto dragon ships. The process was slow and delicate. Each pod had to be disconnected without triggering its emergency revival protocols, then kept at exact temperatures during transport. Dragons curled their bodies around pods, using their internal heat to maintain stability. Sulhe's voice came over the communication network, reporting from other stations. Most were going smoothly, though some stations had suffered more failures than expected. Station 12 had lost power completely. Only 300 of its original 2,000 occupants had survived. Station 4 was in perfect condition, all systems functioning as designed. The reports varied, but one thing was clear. They were running out of time. "The Severance collapse is accelerating," Sulhe reported. "We have maybe 40 hours left, and we're only halfway through the extraction." Back outside the Severance, the Galactic Council was in an uproar. News of the human survivors had spread across the galaxy, and the response was mixed. Some species celebrated, remembering humanity's sacrifice. Others protested, worried about territorial claims on old human worlds. A fleet had assembled at the Severance's edge, but it wasn't a rescue fleet. It was a blockade. Several species, led by the Torvan Collective, had decided that humanity's return would destabilize the current political order. They intended to prevent the dragons from leaving the Severance with their rescued humans. Velmath learned this from Corvex, who'd been monitoring council communications. The crystalline being looked distressed, his normally bright form dimmed with worry. "They're going to stop us," Corvex said. "Even if we get everyone out of here, we won't be able to get past that blockade." Kyung-Soo, who'd been resting after hours of work, sat up. "Let me talk to them." "You need to conserve your strength," Bo-Ra protested. "For what?" Kyung-Soo asked. "For living in a galaxy that doesn't want us back?" He looked at Velmath. "Let me speak to them. Let me remind them what humanity did." Velmath set up the communication link. Kyung-Soo's image was broadcast across all council frequencies, showing an elderly human who'd sacrificed decades of his life to protect his people. "My name is Kyung-Soo," he said. "I'm one of the last humans who remembers Earth before the Severance. I was 28 years old when we made our choice. I had a wife, 2 children, and a career I loved. I gave all of that up so you could live." He paused, letting his words sink in. "We didn't ask for rewards. We didn't demand gratitude. We just held the line because it was right. And now, after 800 years, some of us survived. A tiny fraction of what we were. 40,000 people out of billions." His voice grew stronger. "And you want to turn us away? You want to deny us a place in the galaxy we saved? We don't want your worlds. We don't want your resources. We just want to live. We just want the chance to rebuild, to have families, to exist." He looked directly into the camera. "Is that really too much to ask?" The transmission ended. Kyung-Soo slumped back in his chair, exhausted. Bo-Ra moved to his side, supporting him. "Will it work?" she asked Velmath. "I don't know," Velmath admitted. "But it was worth trying." The extraction continued through another day. More pods came out of the sanctuary stations. More dragons wrapped their bodies around frozen humans, protecting them with the same heat that had once been used to burn human worlds. The irony wasn't lost on anyone. Jiwoo, the engineer who'd been revived earlier, proved invaluable. Despite his weakened state, he worked alongside Velmath, helping to disconnect pods and troubleshoot problems. When a pod's systems began failing during transport, Jiwoo talked a young dragon through an emergency repair, his voice calm despite the stakes. "We're not so different, your people and mine," Jiwoo told Velmath during a brief rest. "We both value strength, loyalty, family. We just expressed it differently. Maybe that's why we fought so hard against each other. And maybe that's why we work so well together now." With 10 hours left before the Severance collapse became irreversible, the last pod was loaded onto a dragon ship. 40,000 humans or close to it. Some stations had lost more than expected. Others had preserved more. The final count would have to wait until they were all safely revived. Kyung-Soo refused to leave Station 7 until every other pod was gone. He stood in the empty cryo bay, looking at the rows of dark pods that held the people who hadn't made it. "I'm sorry," he whispered to them. "I did everything I could." Velmath placed a gentle claw on the old man's shoulder. "You saved 5,000 lives. They're alive because you stayed awake, because you refused to give up. Is it enough?" Kyung-Soo asked. "It has to be," Velmath replied. "Come on. Let's go home." They left Station 7 as the Severance began its final collapse. Behind them, the sanctuary network that had protected humanity for 8 centuries began to crumble. But ahead of them, 300 dragon ships flew in formation, each carrying precious cargo. And at the edge of the Severance, a blockade waited to decide humanity's fate. The dragon fleet emerged from the Severance like a river of fire, 300 ships glowing against the darkness. Behind them, the barrier that had held for 8 centuries finally shattered. Space-time convulsed, sending shockwaves rippling outward. The sanctuary stations, those careful human constructions that had protected so many lives, crumbled into nothing. But the humans were out. 40,000 cryopods secured in dragon ships had made it through. Velmath felt a moment of profound relief as his sensors confirmed they'd cleared the collapse zone. They'd done it. Against all odds, they'd actually done it. Then he saw the blockade. 200 ships from various galactic species formed a wall between the dragon fleet and open space. At their center was a massive Torvan battlecruiser, its weapons systems active. The Torvin had claimed several former human colonies and had no interest in returning them. Sulhi's voice came over the command channel. All ships maintain formation. Do not fire unless fired upon. A transmission came from the blockade. It was Council Speaker Thelmon, a Torvin politician known for his harsh views. His amphibious face filled Velmath's screen, his expression cold. Dragonfleet, you are ordered to halt and surrender the cryopods for Council inspection and processing. The fate of these humans will be decided through proper political channels, not through unauthorized rescue operations. Bora, standing beside Velmath, made a sound of disgust. Processing. They're talking about us like we're cargo. Velmath activated his own transmission, broadcasting to both the Dragonfleet and the blockade. Council Speaker, these are living beings who sacrificed everything for this galaxy. They're not cargo to be processed. They're going home. Home? Thelmon laughed, a wet, unpleasant sound. They have no home. Their worlds have been legally redistributed. They have no legal status, no citizenship, no rights under current galactic law. Before Velmath could respond, another transmission cut in. This one came from a small diplomatic vessel pushing through the blockade. The ship was marked with the insignia of the Nelhari, a species known for their strict adherence to historical records and legal precedent. A Nelhari ambassador appeared on screen, her feathered crest raised in agitation. Council Speaker, I must formally object to your characterization. I've reviewed the historical records extensively. The treaty that allowed for the redistribution of human territories contained a specific clause. If any humans were found alive, all claims would be considered temporary and subject to renegotiation. That clause was a formality, Thelmon protested. No one expected humans to survive. Irrelevant, the Nelhari ambassador replied sharply. The law is the law. You cannot legally detain these humans or prevent their repatriation. Other voices joined in. A Kresh trade representative pointed out that humanity had shared technology freely before the severance, and that debt had never been repaid. A Psyloth colony leader reminded everyone that humans had evacuated their people first when the severance had threatened their home system. One by one, smaller species began speaking up, remembering the help humanity had provided. Then Bora asked Velmath to open a transmission. He hesitated, worried about her strength, but she insisted her image was broadcast across all channels. An elderly human woman, thin and tired, but standing straight with dignity. My name is Bora, she said. I'm 96 years old, though I've only lived through about 40 of those years. The rest I spent in stasis, hoping someone would remember us, hoping the galaxy we saved would let us live in it. She paused, gathering her thoughts. I don't remember much about Earth. I was a child when we evacuated. But I remember my Uncle Timon. He was an engineer who fixed a dragon's ship during the war, even though that dragon was his enemy. He believed that everyone deserved to see home again. Her voice grew stronger. When the severance came, my uncle was one of the last people standing. He could have evacuated. He could have saved himself. But he chose to stay and hold the barrier so others could escape. Your species. Your families. He died so you could live. Bora looked directly into the camera, and now we're asking for the same thing he gave that dragon. A chance to see home again. We're not asking for our old worlds. We're not demanding anything. We're just asking for a place to live, a place to start over. Is that really too much? After everything? The transmission ended. Silence stretched across the communication channels. Velmath watched the blockade, waiting to see what would happen. Thelmon opened his mouth to respond, but before he could speak, something unexpected occurred. The blockade began to fracture. Ships started moving aside, creating gaps in the formation. The smaller species, the ones who'd benefited most from humanity's sacrifice, were refusing to participate. A young Kresh captain transmitted directly to the Dragon Fleet. Sanctuary Station 12 saved my grandparents. If any of you need escort through the blockade, we'll provide it. More voices joined in. What had been a solid wall of opposition became a scattered collection of ships, and most of them were moving aside to let the dragons through. Thelmon's face twisted in fury. You're making a mistake. The political ramifications will be dealt with through proper channels, the Nelhari ambassador interrupted. But not at the expense of basic decency. Let them through. The Torvin battlecruiser held its position for another tense moment. Then slowly, it too moved aside. The Dragon fleet flew through 300 ships carrying humanity's survivors toward the galaxy beyond. Behind them, the Severance collapsed completely, the barrier that had defined an entire age of galactic history finally ending. The journey to safe space took another 2 days. During that time, some of the humans began to be carefully revived. The process had to be slow, controlled with medical teams standing by. Dragon ships weren't designed for human habitation, so makeshift medical bays were created, with dragons literally curling their bodies around spaces to provide heat and protection. Yunji, a human medical officer, was among the first to be revived. She immediately took charge of the other revivals, working with dragon medical personnel who'd never treated humans before. Together, they developed protocols on the fly, adapting to challenges as they appeared. Il-sung, an engineer, helped modify life support systems to better accommodate humans. He worked alongside a young dragon named Hana, who'd never met a human before. They communicated through translation software, sharing jokes and stories as they worked. Jae-hwan, a former soldier, woke up swinging. He'd been fighting when he went into stasis, and part of his mind expected to wake up still at war. Seul-hee herself calmed him down, showing him that the war was long over and that dragons were now allies, not enemies. How? Jae-hwan asked, bewildered. How did this happen? Your people taught us something, Seul-hee replied. You taught us that strength isn't just about winning fights. It's about choosing mercy when you could choose vengeance. It's about sacrifice for others. You showed us what true honor looks like. More humans woke up. Each one went through the same shock, the same disorientation, the same grief for lost time. But they also saw the dragons caring for them, protecting them, and slowly acceptance replaced fear. A child was among those revived. His name was Seo-jun, and he was only 8 years old. He'd been evacuated from Station 3 with his mother, though she was in a different pod that would take longer to safely revive. Seo-jun woke up alone, confused and terrified. Velmath found him crying in a corner of the medical bay. The massive dragon carefully lowered himself to the child's level, trying not to be too frightening. Hello, Seo-jun, Velmath said softly. My name is Velmath. I know you're scared, but you're safe now. Where's my mom? Seo-jun asked, tears streaming down his face. She's still sleeping, but the doctors say she'll be fine. She'll wake up soon. Velmath extended a claw and Seo-jun cautiously touched it. Would you like to help me while we wait? I need someone to explain human food to me. I've been studying it for 800 years, but I've never actually seen a human eat. Seo-jun sniffled. 800 years? That's a really long time. It is, Velmath agreed. I spent all that time waiting for you and your mom and everyone else. I'm very glad you're finally here. Why? Seo-jun asked. Why did you wait so long? Velmath thought about Taemin, about the engineer who'd shown mercy to an enemy. He thought about humanity's sacrifice, about 8 centuries of keeping a promise. He thought about how to explain it all to a child who'd lost so much time. Because someone I knew taught me that everyone deserves a friend, Velmath finally said. And I wanted to be that friend for your people, even if it took 800 years. Seo-jun considered this, then hugged Velmath's claw. Thank you for waiting. The Dragon fleet reached the Outer Territories 3 days after leaving the Severance. The Galactic Council, pressured by public opinion and legal precedent, had reluctantly agreed to allow humanity's resettlement. Several species offered territory, not on former human worlds, but on new planets in unclaimed space. It wasn't perfect. It wasn't what humanity had lost, but it was a beginning. The Dracothi Empire made their own offer. A system of 3 habitable worlds located near Dragon space, with resources and support for rebuilding. It was the richest offer, and it came with a promise of protection and alliance. Kyung-soo, now recovered enough to speak for the survivors, accepted on behalf of humanity. We'll take your offer, he said to the assembled Dragon commanders. Not because it's the best deal, but because we trust you. Because you came for us when no one else did. The evacuation to the new human worlds took weeks. Each cryopod had to be carefully transported. Each human gradually revived and integrated into the growing population. Medical complications arose, requiring dragon and human doctors to work together constantly. But slowly a new human civilization began to emerge. Prefabricated habitats became towns. Towns became cities. Humans and dragons lived side by side, sharing resources and knowledge. The memorial garden was Bora's idea. a place to remember those who didn't make it out of the severance, and those who sacrificed themselves to create the sanctuary protocol. The garden was built on the largest of the 3 human worlds, in a valley where earth plants somehow grew in alien soil. Felmath attended the dedication ceremony. Thousands of humans and dragons gathered together. No longer enemies, barely even separate species anymore, just beings who'd learned to care for each other. Seo Jun, the young boy who'd woken up alone, approached Velmath carrying something carefully in his hands. It was a seed, preserved in a stasis container. The label read Quercus alba, white oak, from Earth. "We're going to plant this," Seo Jun said, "in the middle of the garden. For everyone who's gone." Velmath helped him dig the hole, his massive claws working alongside the child's small hands. They placed the seed together and covered it with soil from 3 worlds: dragon earth, human colony dirt, and material from the severance's edge. As they finished, another figure approached. An elderly man moving slowly with a cane. Velmath's heart stopped. "Taemin?" The engineer smiled. The same gentle smile Velmath remembered from 8 centuries ago. "Hello, old friend. I heard you kept the light burning." Velmath couldn't speak. He simply reached out and gently touched his claw to Taemin's hand, the same gesture they'd shared so long ago. Taemin had survived in one of the deepest sanctuary stations. He'd been revived just days earlier. "Thank you," Taemin said softly, "for remembering, for coming, for bringing us home." "Thank you," Velmath replied, "for teaching me what it means to be worthy of that trust." They stood together in the growing garden, dragon and human, as the white oak seed began its long journey toward the sky. Around them, 2 species that had once tried to destroy each other now worked together to build something new. The Edge Station, that lonely outpost where Velmath had maintained his vigil, was preserved as a monument. An eternal flame burned there, powered by dragonfire visible from space. It was declared a universal symbol, a reminder that hope, no matter how long it takes, is always worth maintaining. Velmath never returned to the station. He didn't need to anymore. The long wait was over. His people had come home, and in the memorial garden, the white oak seed split open, sending roots down into alien soil and a shoot up toward an unfamiliar sun. It grew slowly at first, then stronger, reaching toward the light. Just like humanity itself, the galaxy remembered and the galaxy learned that mercy matters, that sacrifice isn't forgotten, and that sometimes the strongest bonds are forged between former enemies who choose to become something better. Velmath watched the oak sapling grow through the years that followed, and he knew that Taemin had been right all along. Everyone deserves to see home again, and everyone deserves a friend to light the way.